With Valentine's Day fast approaching, we're going to talk about two horror films coming up where the guy of the movie just wants to give the girl of his dreams his heart. Let's get into the first one. Back to the channel. Hope you're all doing well out there. And with Valentine's Day fast approaching, I picked two films to review leading up to Valentine's Day where the guy of the movie just wants the girl of his dreams. And today we're going to do the first one, The Phantom of the Opera from 1989. But before we do that, please do me a favor, as I always ask, like, comment, and subscribe. Join me here, I would appreciate that. To do a little advertising for an upcoming show, Friday at 8 o'clock on this very channel, please come back and join me and my special guest, Dale_A from the Bat and Spider podcast. If you're not subscribed to their podcast, head on over to Apple Podcasts or Spotify and please subscribe to those guys. Those guys are awesome. And we're going to hang out, drink a few beers, talk about horror films, and most notably, we're going to talk about the 2001 slasher film, Valentine, just in time for Valentine's Day. We're going to do a deep dive on that film. And then next week, I'm going to release my review on this channel for Valentine from 2001. So yeah, join us on Friday night. Let's have some fun. You can chat with us as we're doing a live stream. And yeah, it should be a lot of fun. Today, we're going to talk about 1989's Phantom of the Opera. This dropped on November 3rd of 1989. It's rated R. It's an hour and 33 minutes long. And upon release, sadly, it only made $4 million. I couldn't find how much of a budget it had, but let's get into this movie. Now, this was kicking around for a while. This script was written to be a Cannon Films production. Now, when Cannon Films filed for bankruptcy, Menachem Golem went off and started 21st Century Films, and he brought this script on over. He hired Dwight Little. He was coming off of the success of Halloween 4 in '88. Dwight Little looked at the script, thought it was okay, but brought in a writer to do a rewrite. And basically, they rewrote some stuff, but the big thing they added was the New York stuff in the beginning and the New York stuff at the end, which we'll get into as we go through this review. Now, in this film, most notably is Robert Englund coming off of Nightmare on Elm Street 4, and also he had Nightmare on Elm Street 5 come out in '89, the same year this was released. Nightmare on Elm Street 5 came out in August. This dropped in November, and he plays Eric Dressler / the Phantom in this film. And Eric Dressler is basically a composer, an opera composer who makes a deal with the devil because he wants to be loved, and the devil grants his wish, but he also disfigures him so nobody will ever love his appearance and nobody will ever love him. That's the deal he makes with the devil, although he also gets strength and able to move around very fast. And we'll get into that. Jill Sholin, who is coming off of The Stepfather with Terry O'Quinn, plays Christine Day. She is an opera singer, and she is going on an audition at the beginning of this film. We'll get into that. Alex Hyde White plays Richard. When Christine gets transported back to the 1800s, he is her boyfriend in that time period. Bill Nye is in this film as Martin, and he is Richard's partner in the 1800s. Running this opera house where Christine is the backup singer for the diva. And being in this film, we meet Christine and one Molly Shannon in her first ever film role as Christine's friend. And she goes to this audition. An accident happens on stage. Christine passes out and she's transported back to her former life, a life she previously lived back in 1800s in London. And she's the backup singer for this diva at this opera house. And there's somebody lurking in the bowels of the opera house underneath in the sewers, and that is our Phantom, played by the great Robert Englund. And he's all disfigured, and we see in a flashback as he's watching the opera, because the main opera singer loses her voice because the Phantom scares her that she screams so much she hurts her voice, because he skins one of the stagehands and hangs him in her closet, and when she finds him, she screams, loses her voice. So Christine gets her shot to shine as the star of the opera that night. And as she's singing, he has a flashback to the time where he made a deal with the devil. Now, how the Phantom hides his face in this film is a lot different than the old versions with the half-white mask. In this one, he basically takes the skin of other people and makes a face mask along with makeup to make his face look normal. Although his features, at some points when he does the makeup, it looks almost feminine and too pretty. But then once the skin starts rotting, you can start seeing like where he sewed it together and blotches of his skin underneath, which looks like burned skin almost like Freddy Krueger, but the makeup's different. There is a couple moments though where the makeup kind of looks like Freddy Krueger. And obviously this movie was compared a lot to Nightmare on Elm Street because Robert Englund was Freddy Krueger, and this is at the height of the popularity of Nightmare on Elm Street. I mean, Part 4 was the highest grossing one at that point, and then next year you had this. Although Part 5 beat this to the theaters and wasn't as successful as Part 4. But still, Robert Englund as Freddy Krueger was big in pop culture at the time. So this was compared to Freddy a lot. Even with the poster on that DVD that was, or on that Blu-ray that was released back then, they kind of sucked people in with, tried to with the marketing to make this seem like another Freddy movie, kind of. It's called Phantom of the Opera. Now, the Phantom wants to make Christine a star, and he's in love with her. He's obsessed with her. So he basically gets in her head and tries to show her how to become a star. And he basically takes anybody out that gets in her way. A critic that gives her a bad review, the diva herself, he cuts her head off and puts it in the soup bowl at this big gala at the opera house. And then basically at the end, they're hunting down the Phantom, and he gets shot, and Christine sets him on fire, and then she's transported back to present-day Manhattan, where she just got the role in this opera. And the producer, which is played by Robert Englund without any makeup on, takes her back to his apartment, going to take her out for dinner with some of the investors, and she realizes that's the Phantom just in present day, and she basically stabs him and runs off, thinks he's dead, and at the end we get one last stinger where there's this violin player. As she's walking down the street, she gives him money, and all of a sudden he turns towards her and starts playing his music, which is the Phantom music, and that's the end of Phantom of the Opera, 1989. What to like about this film? Well, the set design. Now, the genesis for this film, getting a little trivia here as we go through this, Menachem Golan had just did a film in Budapest, and he had all these sets of the Victorian London streets, and they had this script, and he's like, well, let's save some money. We already have the sets built. Let's make this film, because at the time, around this time, the Phantom of the Opera went into public domain, so anybody could make a movie based on that title. He went to Dwight Little, brought him in, they rewrote the script, and off to Budapest they went. They cast the film, and off to Budapest they went and made this film. So it was funny, the sets were reused, but the sets are actually really well done. And I'm a sucker for good sets that immerse you in that world. And the sets here really, and Dwight Little does a nice job shooting this film. I think he does a better job here directing this film than he did Halloween 4, and I thought he did a really solid job with that one. But this one's really beautifully shot, with all these horrific things going on around us. The makeup on Robert Englund's face was designed by Kevin Yeager, although Kevin Yeager didn't go to Budapest because he couldn't. He was busy on a little show called Tales from the Crypt at the time. But he designed the makeup, and some of the guys who worked for him went to Budapest to apply them to Robert Englund. Also, John Carl Buechler came in. John Volich went to Budapest to do some of the other gore effects. They made the severed head in the soup bowl and did some of the other gore effects as well. When the Phantom kills, now, this film is pretty gory, although it was cut down to get the R rating. A matter of fact, there's a part in the movie where these three guys try to jump the Phantom. He goes out to this pub to have a few drinks, and he's writing, and he leaves, and these guys were kind of like edging him on at the pub, and they follow him outside. They're trying to mug him, and he ends up taking them out. And the one guy, he cuts his head off and rolls down the alley towards the last guy alive. It's in a really cool shot in slow-mo. But in the original cut, I didn't see the footage, but in the documentary, they show pictures of what it originally looked like, and it shows him sawing through his neck and his skin splitting apart before he rips it off and throws it down the alley. That was cut down, and a few other scenes were cut down to get the R rating because they were going to give him a rated X if they didn't make those cuts. And this was right around the time where the MPA was really had a hard-on for horror and cutting it down. Friday the 13th franchise had a problem. Nightmare on Elm Street had a problem. So when this film came about, although they did get away with more in this film than some of those other films, but they still had to make some cuts to get the R rating. The Phantom kills to get the skin to make his masks. A lot like, it kind of reminds me of Darkman or even Popcorn later on that came out a couple years later, which Jill Schoelen's in as well, who stars in that film. I love Robert Englund's performance here. It is definitely a different performance than Freddy Krueger. It's very theatrical, very heightened, but definitely different performance than what Freddy Krueger was. He's not cracking one-liners. He's not, saying all the stuff that Freddy typically would say. It's definitely a different performance. I love the setting. Again, that goes with the set design. Looks great. And the snow at some points, it just looks beautiful the way it's shot and lit. The score is fantastic. I think the cast is really good here. Bill Nye is great. He has some great lines in this film. Jill Schoelen's great as our final girl here. And honestly, I really like this film. And I remember renting it from the video store as a kid. from Broad Street Video in Tamaqua, Pennsylvania. I always mention that video store, but that was my video store of choice back then when I was younger. And I remember renting this several times, and I've always liked it, but as I've gotten older, I have a more of appreciation for it. It's actually a really well done retelling of the Phantom of the Opera. And and they even say in the documentary, Robert Englund says him and Dwight Little's idea was to make basically a Hammer film. I would say a more hardcore Hammer film, but you could definitely feel Hammer film kind of aesthetic in this film. And I dug it, man. I really like this film. This Blu-ray special edition is from Scream Factory. I think you can still get it on Amazon. It's definitely worth it. The transfer's really good. The sound's really good. And that documentary has interviews with Robert Englund, Jill Schoelen, Kevin Yeager, Dwight Little, and a bunch of other guys that worked on the film in that documentary. And it's really well done. It gives you a lot of information as well. Overall, I really like this film. It's a really well done, solid R-rated horror film. And Dwight Little really did a nice job with this film. It's a shame it didn't do as well. I think releasing it in November was a mistake. Why studios do that or did that in the past? This is an October film. They should have released this in the beginning of October. It would have had a whole month. They probably would have made some money, and they could have did the sequel. There was a script for the sequel even before they started production on this called The Phantom of the Opera 2, Terror in Manhattan, or something along those lines. Yeah, Terror in Manhattan. And if this one did well, we would have got a sequel. I would have loved to have seen a sequel to this. Robert Englund said he was hoping they were going to get to do a sequel, but unfortunately it just didn't make the money that they were hoping it would. He said Dwight Little was coming off of Halloween 4, the success of that, and then after this he would go on to do Mark for Death, Rapid Fire, and films like that. I think that's all I have for trivia. But yeah, at the end of the day, this is a really well done R-rated horror film. And I would give it an 8.5 out of 10. It's really solid. Have you ever seen this version of the Phantom of the Opera? I just gave it an 8.5 out of 10. Leave a comment down below. Let me know. Hit the thumbs up, subscribe button, share this video. I would appreciate that. Come on back on Friday, 8 o'clock Eastern for live streaming with my buddy Dale _ from the Bat and Spider podcast. But until next time, bye.